Welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Biz Talk. Today we have Brianne Miers here with us. She is a PR expert. So welcome, Brianne.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Brianne.
Great. Again, my name is Brianne. I'm in Boston, Massachusetts, and I have been a consultant for about 5 years now, focusing on strategic communications, including public relations and social media, messaging, planning, all of those things. I've had a long career in nonprofits, mostly in public relations, donor communications, and marketing. So I have a lot to talk about and share with you this morning.
Okay, great. All right, so let's get started. So my first question to you is, why do nonprofits need to be concerned with public relations? Why is PR important?
Yeah, I think PR is very important to nonprofits, basically because they rely on the public more so than other types of organizations. They need financial support from the public. They need a lot of times volunteers. They need to have good relationships with partners in the community, other nonprofits, government organizations, for-profit institutions. A lot of times they maybe get funding from the legislature, or they're trying to advance a particular cause or issue that they need public support for. So it's really important for a nonprofit to maintain a strong public image.
Yeah, I totally agree that they need to maintain a very strong public image. As a matter of fact, I just did a live on that this morning about making sure that you're reaching out to people in the community, because if they don't know that you exist, then they can't donate. They can't
help you. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And if they don't know what you're doing, and they don't know your story accurately, another part of public relations that's important is also managing any miscommunication that's out there and making sure that your perception is positive and it's accurate and based on factual information and not hearsay or speculation.
So you hit on something that I want to talk about. How often does that happen, where there's some type of miscommunication, and how does that happen? How does
I'm sure. Yeah, there's lots of. I think we've all seen a lot of horror stories in the news when an organization's image can kind of spiral out of control, and it's unfortunate, and it does happen, and sometimes things can take on a life of their own, especially now with social media. So we have that working for us and against us. So there's misinformation can spread like wildfire, and the comment section of a Facebook page or in the comment section of a newspaper article that's online. So it can happen quite often. So it's something that nonprofits really need to stay on top of, both the online chatter and the perceptions that are out there in the community, just by talking to folks and trying to put out as much positive and accurate and factual information as possible to hopefully counteract any bad blood that's out there that may happen despite their best efforts.
Okay. Do you find that a lot of times, like you talked about the comment sections we know about keyboard bullies.
Yeah, exactly. Unfortunately.
But do you think a lot of times when people are putting bad comments in the comment section of a post that a nonprofit puts up, it's because of poor customer service, or just people just want to be malicious?
I think it's both. I think any type of public institution has the same problem. Usually you only hear from people. Yelp is the same thing for restaurants. You only hear that one person that one time who didn't get seated or something.
Right.
So it's not a really accurate picture, but those things can take off, of course, as we've all seen. And so, then there are the bullies. And so I always say to, usually but if you have goodwill in the community, if you have a lot of positive supporters, if you have people who really do know you and your work, that can really counter it. An organization should not engage as the organization on any type of comment section of a newspaper article or anything like that that's getting out of control. But you would hope that your supporters can tune in and say like, oh, hey, that's not really true. They don't really do that. Or, hey, I had, they really helped me when I was down. Or, you can pepper in those positive comments, which is great. And then, with social media, if there's things kind of getting out of control on your page, Facebook page, for example, I always say, just focus on the factual. It's like, I hate these guys. They, we're closed when I went at 6:00. And you can say, well, actually, we close at 5:00 every day, but we're happy to, help you if you come again tomorrow at 9 a.m. or something.
Okay.
So just to focus on the factual and kind of take the emotion out of it, because people do have, strong emotions, especially if you're working with, sensitive populations and sensitive issues. So you just want to focus on the factual. And again, you want to focus on putting out as much content as possible about, the good work you're doing and the people you're helping. And that can help balance it out a little bit.
Okay. And how do you, what is the best ways that you find for nonprofit organizations to put out those positive attributes or positive stories that they have in their organization?
Well, I think we're really lucky today in that, the media landscape obviously has changed dramatically in the past 10, 15 years, and that organizations now, they don't have to sit around and wait for a reporter to be interested in their story or in their organization and then write something, and then they see it in the paper the next day, and then they can write a letter to the editor if it was wrong. So obviously everything is a lot more immediate, and organizations have the power to tell their own stories. And that's, most organizations are doing very, very good work. There's very good people working there. There's very good people supporting them. And so they have a wealth of stories to be told. And so I think nonprofits are very, very lucky in that way. And, it can be a little overwhelming with all the various social media kind of tools. But to focus on a blog, for example, that tells your stories and tells your news, to keep your social media channels, focus on one or two that are relevant to your audience, keeping those up to date, maintaining an e-newsletter, a fresh web presence. Those are all important. And don't discount the traditional news as well, putting out, your local newspapers. People still read those.
Every Sunday they get those.
Exactly. Yeah. Even like the weekly community papers, people do read those, and they usually are looking for stories. So not everything needs to be in the New York Times.
Right.
You can really build some good relationships with your local reporters.
Right.
So it should be a fairly comprehensive strategy, both online and offline, to maintain your presence.
And I'm glad that you said that, because a lot of times we focus so much on online because we think that everything is just social media.
Exactly. Yeah.
That we forget that there are a segment of the population who's not interested in social media. I have a friend my age who has no social media pages. None. Yeah. No, I mean, you cannot find her. You cannot find her anywhere on the internet.
She's lucky.
Yes, she has decided that she wants no part of it, and that's it.
Yeah. So it's, everyone's going to, and that's the thing about knowing your audience. Everyone is going to want to receive their information in a particular way. And so you need to have those different touch points. You still need to send acknowledgement and appeal letters. You should, you need to have some sort of event presence in the community, maybe a breakfast event or lunch events that people can engage with you, an open house. So there has to be a comprehensive calendar for the year of both online and offline ways you can engage your supporters and, again, tell your stories to them.
Right. And you're talking right to, like I said, that live I did this morning, because that's one of the things I talked about. Year end is coming up. People should be focusing on their year-end campaigns, their Giving Tuesday campaigns. And I said it to one person. They were like, but it's so early. Like, listen, shopping. People, it's called Christmas in July. People are already shopping for December. And I said, once July rolls around, you blink twice and it's December,
Exactly. Yeah.
literally,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
You need
So
to take a look at the year in advance, for
exactly,
sure.
because
Yeah.
it takes time to develop a relationship, like you're talking about, develop that
Absolutely.
relationship and find the right outlets to deliver that relationship, that information to your prospective donors, your current donors, and the ones that you've lost, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it takes a long time, especially to kind of to build relationships with,
Hmm.
yeah, with reporters, to build up
Exactly.
social media followings, to
Hmm.
plan campaigns out, to plan content out. You definitely, you want to be looking, 6 months in advance for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, because I just put out a course called Year-End, what is it called? Year-End Fundraising Superheroes Boot Camp.
Oh,
So
great.
yeah, it takes them through
Yeah.
the steps month, week by week, month by month to get to that point. So at what point in time do you think that a nonprofit organization should contract a PR person? Do you think it should be in the beginning stages, middle, like when do they need to have one?
Yeah, I think, don't wait until something goes wrong. So that, I see that happen a lot. You want to, whenever an organization can afford it, I would say as they're starting to grow, starting to have more of an external, making more of an effort to communicate externally, to expand their reach. They need to start putting some money behind having a strategic communications plan. Having someone dedicated to advancing their mission through, again, traditional media, social media, and keeping their eye on the ball with all of the chatter that's out there to make sure that their relationship remains strong.
Okay. Um, do you feel that this needs to be like a full-time position that they create for someone like a communications
Mm-hmm.
director, or would the communications director be different from the PR director, from the PR person?
Yeah, that's a good question. Organizations really struggle with that. And, I've done both. I've been in-house as a communications director. And now obviously I have my own agency.
Right.
To start an organization is probably best served by working with a freelancer, who has a little bit more flexibility, and they also don't need a lot of time to get up to speed. They don't need to be trained in any sort of skills related to public relations and social media. So they just need to learn about the organization. So I think a freelancer is a really good way to go to start, to get some some counseling and some coaching on how to put together a plan, and to talk about what the priorities should be for the organization. I think that's great, and a freelancer is a little bit more affordable than a firm. A firm is fantastic if you can afford it. I live in Boston, so it's a big city. So if you're engaging with a firm here, you're probably looking at a minimum retainer. They usually work on a retainer model of
Yeah.
$5,000, $7,500 a month, and usually they're going to want at least a 1-year contract, 6 months to a year contract. So it's a huge investment. Whereas a freelancer, it could be, a typical freelancer is probably about $150 an hour. So it could be a little bit more affordable. And then they can fill in the gaps with, if there's a junior level, coordinator position that can do some of the more tactical items, like the social media posts or something like that. I think that's a good way to structure it. On the flip side, having a communications director, they typically get spread pretty thin. In my experience, you're usually a catch-all for a lot of different things. And the act of the media relations component of public relations can kind of fall by the wayside, because you're updating the website, you're running social media, you're writing blogs, you're doing advocacy, you're doing publications, you're writing op-eds and speeches and things like that. So the time that you're working with reporters and building those relationships that's very tedious and time consuming. So larger organizations, they do spin off the PR role. They have like a PR manager, for example, that reports to a communications director. So I've seen that, or a communications director manages an external firm or freelancer.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, it's definitely an investment of time, an
Mhm.
investment of resources, but obviously, like fundraising, you have to spend money to make money.
Oh yeah.
At least I think it's critical to have, for a growing nonprofit, to have strategic communications, to have public relations on its radar. And again, don't wait till there's a bad article about you in the local paper.
Yeah.
You want to build up that goodwill in advance, and have a strategy in place, have some resources to draw on, have some goodwill built up
Okay.
to weather the storms that inevitably come when you're engaging with the public.
Exactly, because storms will come. Once you're dealing with
Exactly.
people to people business, things happen. People, you think you're putting your best foot forward, and for whatever reason, somebody's disgruntled. They may not say anything to you, but they'll
Exactly.
go on social media and they'll blast you.
Exactly.
So,
It
one of
can,
yeah,
it can happen very quickly, unfortunately.
yes, yes,
Yeah,
it can. And then you're spending a lot of time trying to play cleanup and
exactly.
yeah. One of the things that you said that I really liked was the fact that you have to spend money in order to make money. And a lot of people don't realize that. So a lot of people may look at a PR person as an unnecessary
Hmm.
expense for their organization. But a good point that you made was that you don't want to wait until something happens in
Right. Yeah.
order to try to fix it. You need to be ahead of the game all the time. So I really like that. And that's one of the things that I really think instead of getting a communications director, which is a full time employee, where you have to pay benefits and all of that stuff for,
Right. Yeah.
maybe you might start off with a freelance PR person who
Right.
can help you to get where you want to. Because I've worked with smaller organizations where the ED is trying to do everything. So
Exactly.
they're sending out press releases. They're trying to build relationships with newspaper reporters, with TV personalities, with the local TV stations who, they have those little shows like we have Good
Mhm.
Morning
Yeah.
Connecticut or something like that,
Exactly. Yeah.
radio
Community
station
television. Yeah.
stuff. Right. And it takes a lot of time and a lot of following up. And I see a lot of times they try to do it on their own and then they become overwhelmed. They become discouraged when they're not getting the calls
Hmm.
back immediately. And I'm like, you just have to keep plugging away at it because
Yeah.
it does take time. They have other stories that they're chasing as well. So yours may not be the one that they need right
Yeah.
now. But at some point in time, they're going to need a filler story and then they're going to come to you. But you have to keep reaching out and engaging. You can't
Exactly.
just send out a press release and then that's it.
Yeah, it could take a long time to build those
Yeah.
relationships, and it's about consistency and staying in front of them. And it's like, again, it's very similar to fundraising in that it takes
Mhm.
a lot of
Takes
touch
time.
points,
Yeah.
and keeping the news, the flow of news going out, and getting in front of people. And it can take a while, and sometimes it's just luck.
Yeah. Yeah.
you
It
know so
is.
sometimes you get that story, or you get that $10,000 check, and you say, we didn't, how did we even know this person?
Right.
It's pure luck, but a lot of times it's keeping your head down and being very consistent, sure and steady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that there's any major, or are there any major differences between PR in a for-profit organization versus PR in a nonprofit organization that you want to talk about?
Not really. The skill set is very similar, and the function and tactics is really similar. Obviously, for a public company, there's an investor relations component. So, communicating with, they obviously have, if it's a public company, they have shareholders. So there's that side to public relations. But in terms of the for-profit, nonprofit, not really. I find that. Since the a nonprofit organization, they have a very complex set of sometimes it is easier to just sell shampoo, or talk about, we have this great shampoo, or
Right.
the nonprofit side of things can't, it's very complex. You're tackling sometimes some very complicated, very very
Touchy.
complicated, complex, sensitive issues that people have
Yes.
really strong feelings about. You're talking, poverty and racism and things that aren't being solved overnight, that people have very, very strong opinions on, for good or for worse. And so, it can be, it's a fantastic job. That's, it's always been my focus for the most part to work in nonprofit public relations. But, at the same time, sometimes you wish you could just sell some shampoo. So I think a lot of us who work in nonprofits feel like you're like, oh,
I can
sometimes you
imagine.
wish it could just be a little simpler than trying to, solve world peace.
Yeah.
But obviously we do this work because, we are invested in the missions, and we're invested in, making our communities better, our society better. And so, I think for me, PR has been a great way to really share stories of organizations doing really good work, and sharing stories about the people who are being helped.
Do
And
you
so that's
mind
what I can do.
sharing a story of, you don't have to name any company
Okay.
names, but a couple of scenarios of situations that you've had to go into a nonprofit and fix for them because of whatever happened, whether
Yeah.
it was someone was, like you said, someone was just not happy that they weren't open at 6 o'clock and they wanted service at that time,
Right. Right.
whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, I worked in legal aid, the Massachusetts Legal Assistance Corporation, for a long time, as their communications director, and there was a lot of we always had to, correct a lot of misconceptions about civil legal aid versus criminal, civil courts versus criminal courts, and so saying why. Why should someone have a lawyer if they're going to be evicted, or why should a juvenile have an attorney that's, being going through the court system? And so, a lot of people are dealing with these civil issues. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't commit a crime. Their landlord is trying to kick them out, or their company is denying them unemployment benefits. And so there was a lot of public, and I found it fascinating too. I wasn't really, it wasn't, they weren't issues that I really had given a lot of thought to before I started working there. And so there was a big public, we did a lot of advocacy, we did a lot of opinion pieces, we did a lot of action alert email campaigns. We did legislative lobbying events at the State House here in Boston.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a very, again, online and offline campaign that we ran every year to, drum up support for civil legal aid, and increasing our budget and providing attorneys and paralegals legal support to people going through some of the worst times in their lives. But there was also, there's always the trolls you have to contend with as well. But I think that experience is really fascinating, just in terms of learning so much about our legal system, and all the misperceptions around it and how it operates.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of misconceptions
Mm-hmm.
around the way how a legal system works,
Exactly. Yeah.
because there's so many little nuances that people just can't get
Mm-hmm.
it right. And that's why we need lawyers.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And it's, and the fact that, yeah, you're not entitled to an attorney unless you can, in a civil case, but you're entitled one
In
in
a
criminal
criminal.
court. And so people are facing some of the worst times in their life, and in their lives, and they have no support, and they can't pay for it. So, it was a very fascinating, look and
Mhm.
inside how everything operates. And, I really enjoyed advocating for that organization, and telling their stories, because we had, the stories, obviously, if an attorney can help save someone's home, and
Right.
give them benefits that put them back on their feet. And,
Mhm.
now we see with, the immigration situation, attorneys are reuniting families and being advocates for children who don't have a voice. And so, there's obviously, there's organizations that are doing very, very critical work out there.
Mhm.
And their stories need to be told, and need to be told well and accurately.
Right. Okay. So that was a great example. Because plays right into what's going on now in our
Mhm.
society. That's a hot button topic.
Exactly.
So give me an example of how you would work with an organization. Let people kind of know what it's like to work with a
Mhm.
PR. So if I was a nonprofit organization, an ED and a nonprofit, and I was looking to hire a PR, not that we had a problem yet, but maybe
Mhm.
I see a problem coming up or something,
Yeah.
and I reach out to
Need
you,
some awareness.
and yeah, I hire you. What would you do when you come in? Like, how would you start?
Yeah, so typically, when we start engagements, it's getting to know the organizations. It has to be wrapped into their, strategic plan and priorities. So hopefully they have some sort of process in place for, what they're trying to accomplish.
Mhm.
Any sort of their development plan. If they have a fundraising plan, who they're targeting, who their key donor targets are. That's important to know. And then we map out, geography, who their targets are. We start with the audience, the kind of people they're targeting. Is it, is the donor audience? Is it legislators? Is it, the media? Is it, corporations? So who they want to be engaging with, where those people are,
Mhm.
what they're, reading, where they are on social media, and then, conducting an audit. So what they currently are doing, what they've done in the past, kind of what works, what hasn't worked. You want to take a look at their resources. Do they have a communications coordinator who can post on social media every day, or an intern? Do they have, what sort of, are they getting any sort of capacity building grants that could help fund this work?
Mhm.
Kind of what they have available to kind of keep the operation going on a day-to-day basis. And then we look at, we map out stories and map out spokespeople. So what do they have to talk about? What kind of issues do they want to engage in? For example, I'm working with an organization now, Thompson Island Outward Bound here in Massachusetts, and they're very big on summer being the quote unquote fifth semester for students, especially students in cities. Lower income students have much fewer opportunities for out of classroom activities like camps and sports and things like that.
Mhm.
And that opportunity gap, they call it,
Yes,
widens as they
that's
get
what I was just
older.
gonna say. Fill in the
Yeah,
gap.
exactly. So so now we're engaging with them, to put stories out there, to get them in the media around, to talk about, this is a thought leadership piece around summer being the fifth semester, that, we can't afford for students to watch TV and play video games, even though that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
That learning time over the summer is really critical. So finding those issues you can tap into, those conversations, and it has to be timely. Obviously it's summer now. We're already starting back to school stories.
Right.
Like we talked about,
Mhm.
the year goes quick. So you have to kind of map out like, okay, we can, in August, we're going to be starting back to school. And then,
Mhm.
so you have to start, planning out the year. And then the spokespeople that you have to work with, it may not necessarily be your executive director. It could be a program director, or, you have to kind of balance who would be the best person. Not everybody is comfortable or skilled at talking to the media. So it may not be the ED if he or she, may be more comfortable behind the scenes. Maybe that person is a better writer, so maybe they enjoy writing op-eds.
Mhm.
Maybe there's someone who's a little bit more dynamic who would take more of any kind of broadcast opportunities or interview opportunities.
Okay.
So thinking through those issues, and then again looking at the year and plotting out stories and activities, looking at events that we can leverage, issues we can leverage.
Mhm.
Then you always, you need to keep your eye on the news and what's happening and where you can dip in to be a resource. I have an organization I'm working with. They talk a lot about the importance of mindfulness, teaching mindfulness to children, especially children experiencing trauma.
Right.
And obviously now again with the news in terms of the immigration issues, how traumatized children, that effects can last for generations. And so how mindfulness can help children heal from trauma and kind of prevent that intergenerational trauma to carry on. And so they're looking at engaging in some of those conversations around how we can help children with mindfulness. So it's, you want to keep an eye on the news, keep an eye on the social media chatter, and determine where you're comfortable kind of engaging in conversations, perhaps on the state or national level that might, that you might be able to get some coverage around.
Okay. So it's one of the things that you do you help them to create like promotional videos that directly talks about the issues that their nonprofit organization has, or their mission, their vision?
Yeah, I mean, we start, it depends on how comfortable they are with their language. That's an important component of the planning process as well. Do they have key messages they're comfortable with? Are they comfortable with their mission, vision, value statements, their talking points, elevator pitch?
Right.
I do a lot of that work. Some organizations say like, actually, we're pretty good at that stuff. We just need to kind of clean things up a little bit. So if they already have that foundation, then we'll kind of start on the production of actual, if they need stuff, if they need a video, if they need a printed, an annual report, which, not so many people are doing printed materials anymore. But video is a great, obviously a fantastic storytelling tool. And, like you mentioned, Facebook Live, I did 2 Facebook Live broadcasts of events recently. And, we were just blown away by the engagement of the Facebook Live videos. And they both were events that were not open to the public. So, supporters could be, just tuning in at home. And so those are great. Like I say, like everyone has, video capabilities right in their hand with their phone. And so it's so easy now. And I try to encourage nonprofits to not be scared of, not everything has to be an 8-minute gala video that you're showing. You can just do a little snippet of
an activity.
Exactly. If you're, Facebook, if you're touring maybe you have if you do affordable housing, a tour of the new structure, the new building, or, if you, obviously you need to get permission, but, if any, you can do little interviews with clients and, staff, supporters, to have some fun with it and not have it, be so staged or so perfect.
Right.
So that's
people like authenticity.
Exactly. And I think that's the direction things are going. I mean, there's definitely a place for more produced video if people have the money for it. It's fantastic, but I think you can definitely sprinkle in a little bit more, again, the fun and the personality. And I think it's not always comfortable for organizations to think like that. But I think that tide is turning a little bit. I think the initial is like, wait, you're putting this on live? We're not going to be able to, but, how are we going to edit this? What if something happens? And so you just kind of have to roll with it and have fun with it. But yeah, video is an incredibly, incredibly powerful way for nonprofits to get their stories out there.
And you made a very good point, and it's something that I bring up all the time to organizations. You must have that media release signed. You cannot put your clients in pictures, on videos. You cannot use their names unless they give you explicit permission to do so.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. And make sure it's translated too if you are serving populations who don't speak English.
Yes.
You're working
your brochures, your website, everything should be translated into from English into the language that your population speaks.
Exactly. That's important. Again, for kids, I'm really sensitive around children, as most people are, sensitive around children appearing in promotional videos and brochures and things like that. So to make sure that there is, explicit permission. And then even beyond that, it's just trying to have a sensitive take on it. I think there's some creative photography options of, you can film people from the back or photograph their hands, and there's different tricks you can use. But as long as it's very clear that you do have permission to share stories and photos of children.
Okay, well, I mean, that's all the questions I have.
That's great.
There's something else that you want to talk about.
Anything
else that you want to hit on? Or you
Yeah, I
just
would
want to
say,
reiterate some of the points that you made about hiring a PR person and working with a PR, not waiting until something happens
yeah,
to
I'd
be
say that's probably
proactive.
the biggest. I think again, it's the media landscape has changed so dramatically, and again, we're no longer sitting around and waiting for the local paper to write about us.
Mhm.
And I think I think it's encouraging now. Um, it's encouraging nonprofits to start thinking about their communications in a different way. And I would just encourage people to not to be afraid to tell their own stories. And so I know it's obviously a capacity issue at nonprofits, um, but like I always tell people, like a blog post, only needs to be 500 words. It just needs to be your thoughts about something. It shouldn't be perfect. It's not a white paper. Your video doesn't need to be perfectly
Yeah,
produced. It can be again a little Facebook Live or a little clip.
right.
um, you can shoot, make sure if photos I'm a little pickier with, but there's, you want to be a little selective about photos you share, but again, have some fun with it, show some personality, tell your stories, try and build relationships with reporters, and think of ways to create news for yourself. And I always say, you can try and give an award or leverage, send photos to, leverage your events by sending photos to local papers. They love those, partner with other organizations to write op-eds or to write, guest post on each other's blogs. So, kind of keep the wheels turning to think of ways you can get your story out there. You don't want to kind of sit back and hope people share your story for you. You want to get ahead of it, and share your own story.
Mhm. To add to that, also building community partners, whether it's small business owners or corporate. If you
Exactly.
have
Yeah,
whoever you build community partners with, let the community know so that they know that this
exactly.
particular company is supporting your nonprofit organization. Remember, it's a give and take. People looking for return on investments.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times too, like if you're partnering with an organization, have that, they usually hopefully have some more resources. If you're partnering with a business or you're getting a grant or some money from a business,
Mhm.
have them, posted on their social media or in their newsletter, or,
Yes.
send out a press release.
Mhm.
So kind of make sure you leverage those relationships as well, and just ask what, hey, we have some photos of the check presentation, do you think you could share these? And so you look for opportunities to work with your partners, your donors,
Mhm.
and see where you can kind of have your story be spread even further.
Right. And also, one of the things I like to tell nonprofit organizations, you should be collecting stories as you go along the way.
Exactly.
So a PR person should not come in, or a communications person shouldn't come into your organization
Mhm.
and you have nothing to present to them.
Yeah,
Every day that
that's an important point.
Yeah. Every day that your door is open, something is happening. There's a story happening
Yeah,
on a daily basis. You have to choose what the highlights are of that story and document them so that when it does come time to, for those social media posts, for those videos,
exactly. Or
radio
reporter calls.
right, radio
Yeah,
opportunities or reporter
yeah,
calls, that you can just go into your file, look at it. Oh, I
absolutely.
remember this. Let me talk about it. And again, like we said before, don't
That's a
mention any
fantastic point.
names.
Exactly. I have a
Don't
great anecdote
mention
around that. One of my clients, a former client that was a food bank,
names.
they during the economic downturn, they got a call from Oprah, or Oprah's
Oh.
production folks, and said, we want a family who was formerly middle class but now has turned to a food bank. And they gave some parameters around how many people need to be in the family, some of the demographic information about the family, because they were looking to fill a certain slot.
Data collection.
And
This is
they
all about
couldn't,
data collection. They didn't
exactly. And
collect
they
any
couldn't find
data.
anybody. So they
Oh,
missed their opportunity to be on Oprah. And so they've been
and
kicking
I'm sure
themselves
they had
out.
tons of families that they could have.
Absolutely. They just couldn't
Yes.
think, of who fit the bill, and, they had a tight turnaround. So that's why I always say, like, just, get the stories, get them organized, get them in a certain, one specific place, have one person be the owner of it, have all photos, video clips, in one folder, and then have I encourage a spreadsheet, perhaps
Spreadsheet.
like a Google
Yes, me
spreadsheet,
too.
saying, with all your, this, with
Yep.
the names, ages, demographic info. Do we have a waiver signed? Would they be a good spokesperson at an event? Would they be good with the media? No, they would be better for this. And having notes so having your stories cataloged and shared in a common space, and collected, accessed. The story collection should be part of a standard staff meeting check-in
Right.
item, or an
Right.
email
I
goes
love
out
that.
once every other week saying, hey, does anybody have good stories? Because usually the person doing the communications and fundraising is obviously not on the front lines.
Right.
They're not seeing those stories every day like frontline staff is. So there needs to be a communications mechanism a policy in place to get those stories back to the organization so they can package them and put them out there in the
Right.
world.
I absolutely love
So,
this, because that's one of the things I focus on a lot, is telling nonprofit leaders that you need to collect these stories and you should have that database. There is no reason that anyone should come into your organization and ask you something that's demographic about the people you serve, and you can't answer it.
absolutely.
That
Yeah,
is your
absolutely. Should
response.
have
You need a
service
collection.
certificates.
You need it for grant writing. You need it for when reporters come in. You need it for donors. Sometimes donors come to you and they ask you for that information because they really
Exactly.
want to know, do you know what's going on in your organization? And when it comes to that too, I also tell them that board members should also come and interact with the population, because
Absolutely.
board
Yeah, if they
members should
can,
be
that'd
able
be,
to tell
yeah,
stories as well. They should,
absolutely.
when they're going out, because they have their own personal fundraising that they
Mm-hmm.
need to do, when they're talking to people, their friends, their families, whoever they're going to try to collect monies from,
Yeah,
they need to be knowledgeable about
absolutely.
what's going on. And
They need
that's
to have those anecdotes in their
right.
back pocket. I
And the
always
only
say,
way they can do that
yeah,
is to interact with the population.
yeah, and they need to have training too. I do
Yes. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
I do trainings for board and staff
Hmm.
around key messages, around elevator pitches.
Hmm.
We just did one last week where we did with a staff, we call it a mocktail party. We gave people different personas and we had them practice doing the
Yes.
elevator pitches, answering questions about the organization. And then I always tell people to have a couple anecdotes in their back pocket to illustrate
Hmm.
their work, because that's what people remember. And, I always say politicians are really good at that. They
Yes,
say,
they
oh,
are.
I met Betty at this cafe in Iowa and she told, and so having those, just two or three little ways, oh, we helped this, kid last year. He was so, and just to be able to rattle off a little story here and there to really illustrate the work is so important, because people connect with people. They remember stories. If you sit there like, we provide, X number of
Right.
meals, that stuff isn't what you remember. So, have key messages, have an elevator pitch, have language that is, have good language for your organization, and make sure people use it and they know
Yes.
where it is. They're not
No
making up their
jargon,
own.
just regular language
They're
that
not
people
making
can
up their own
understand.
language.
Yes.
They're not out there doing their own thing.
Hmm.
Have a document accessible, train people on how to talk about the organization, and have stories and a couple of stories in your back pocket for sure. That's very critical for we call it being brand ambassadors. Anybody who
Yes.
cares about your organization as an ambassador, and they need to
Hmm.
be able to provide that public face to it. And it's
Right.
important that they
And a
know
lot of
and
times
understand.
ambassadors become fundraisers. So
Oh
they
yeah,
really need
yeah,
to know what is going on in your organization. And they, like you said, they need to know the elevator pitch. They need to have those anecdotal stories.
yeah.
They need to know what's going on with your population. Because a lot of um, your donations can come from brand ambassadors.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
lot of
Yeah,
people
you just
sleep
never
on
know.
brand ambassadors,
Yeah.
but they can be crucial to the financial success of your organization. But it all goes back to relationships. Are you building out those
Yep.
relationships with them, or are you taking advantage of them or discarding them and thinking that they're not worthy of your organization? So,
Exactly. Yeah, you just, you never know, who people are going to meet, who they're going to
right.
interact with on your behalf. And so,
Mhm.
everybody should be prepared to the degree they can. So it's really important now. Again, offline and online, you need to kind of be aware of what's being said about you, and to make sure it's a strong, accurate portrayal of who your organization is and what you stand for.
Right. All right, that's great. I really love that. I love the last part a
Yeah.
lot because those are like the key components of a successful nonprofit organization is that data collection. And a lot of nonprofit organizations thinks it's so tedious to actually collect those the data
Yeah.
that they
Yep.
don't. And like
It
you
definitely
said,
gets
the
pushed
Oprah
aside.
moment can
Yeah.
happen, and you
Oprah, I don't think I think that Oprah anecdote is, I tell that all the
yeah.
time. And it's because, I mean, they've been kicking themselves for like 10 years about
Of
it.
course, an Oprah moment can
Yeah.
happen, and you don't have the
And you miss it.
information
Yeah.
to readily give it to that producer that called
Yeah.
you. Bam, you missed the moment because you failed to collect data.
Yeah,
When I
exactly.
come
So
in
tell
as a
that
grant
story.
writer, or yeah, a grant writer, or a fundraiser, or even to do strategic planning, and you don't have data, it makes my job 10 times harder because
Exactly.
now we have to backpedal and we have to go back from the beginning and try to collect data in order to move forward.
Yeah.
So,
Same with any
mhm.
sort of PR person or communications
Yep.
person. So
So, Brianne, let my audience know how they can find you.
thank you. So I have a website at kindcommunications.com, KIND communications.com, and that has a little bit about me on it. But thank you so much for listening. I'm always happy to provide advice, have a chat if you have any questions. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you need some help around this. I know it's very overwhelming for a lot of organizations to tackle, and so I'm happy to be a resource.
Okay, great. All right, guys, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Nonprofit Biz Talk. And thank you, Brianne Miers, for being my guest today and
Thank you,
talking
Tracy.
about PR.
Thank you.
Something that a lot of nonprofits don't even think that they need, which they
Exactly.
really do. All right,
Exactly.
thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.